Dr. Michael Breus.
Thanks, Jimmy. All right. How's everybody doing? Sit down, relax. Relax. How's everybody doing today? So I'm hitting you at the perfect time to take a nap right about now. And we'll talk about napping in a minute. But first of all, thank you all. First of all, has this not been one of the most amazing experiences? This is fantastic. I mean, the caliber of information has really been great. So thank you, Jim, and to everybody at Quick Learning for all your help. It's been great. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give two different talks today. One is about sleep for peak performance, and the other is about something called chronotypes. So I'm actually got two different slide presentations that are going to be going on. The good news is you don't have to look at them both at the same time. I'm going to be doing them one after the other. So I always like to start off with an interesting quote, and I thought this was one of my favorites. So this was President Obama, right as he was taking office, asked Bill Clinton, what is the one piece of advice that you would give me? And Bill Clinton said, in my long career, most of the mistakes I made when I was too tired. How many people can relate to that? Right, okay, so we're gonna make sure that doesn't happen. You make better decisions when you're not tired, so that would be my only piece of advice. That's a pretty impressive piece of advice when you start to think about all the different things that he could tell you, like, is Area 51 real? Are there aliens? All those kind of good things. So the good news is that he told him that he needs to sleep. So I want to educate everybody about how sleep works, because knowledge really does teach you a whole lot about what's going on in your body. And when you learn what's going on in your body, then you can affect it and you can change it. I'm going to teach everybody here that you can control your sleep. Most people think you can't, but you actually can. So it turns out that there are two distinct systems for sleep. So one is called the drive, right? And it's a lot like hunger, right? So I'm hungry, I eat something, and that hunger begins to dissipate. It turns out that this sleep drive is all based on something called adenosine. So when a cell eats a piece of glucose, something comes out the other side. Part of what comes out the other side is this stuff called adenosine. It gets into your bloodstream and it goes to a very specific receptor site in your brain. And it's kind of a lock and key. It kind of fits in there right nicely. And then as those fill up, you get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier. As a side note, you may not know this, because I learned it fairly recently, but the molecular structure of adenosine and the molecular structure of caffeine are off by one molecule. And so caffeine fits very nicely into that, and it blocks that adenosine, and that's why caffeine has a tendency to keep you awake. So we now know about sleep drive, and that's very, very important. But let's also talk about sleep rhythm. Wait, did it come up? No? There we go, sleep rhythm. So you ever notice how you only get hungry for at breakfast, lunch, and dinner at fairly regular times? Well, your body works the same way, and it's something called your circadian rhythm, right? And this is an internal biological clock. It's actually based on your genetics, and that'll be the whole part of the second talk. But having that circadian rhythm becomes very, very important. Now, when your drive is at one side and your rhythm is at the other and they're equal, you sleep. However, other things can happen. So this situation can happen. So has anybody in here ever had the experience where they get in bed and they're physically exhausted? I mean, they are so doggone tired, they just can't wait to crawl into bed. And then what happens? Your brain clicks on and you can't do anything. How many people in here have experienced that before? Right? I call that being wired and tired. Right? That's when you've got too much drive and not enough rhythm. And the reason is because you probably got into bed early. Right? Because you're so exhausted. You said, I'm just going to get in bed at 8 o'clock tonight, catch up on my sleep, and then it never seems to work itself out. The opposite can also happen. I went too far. Can I go backwards? Yeah. So you can also have your rhythm be off. So what happens if you take a nap right after dinner? Anybody? You have a hard time sleeping that night, right? Because you've lowered your sleep drive, and now your rhythm is ready, but your drive isn't ready. So really understanding how these two systems play against each other becomes critically important. And so what we're talking about here is a balance, right? Balance between the two systems is what allows a person to enter into a state of sleep. So that's thing number one. This diagram tells us about something called sleep architecture. So the orange on the side is when you're awake, then your body drops down into the gray, which is stages 1 and 2, then down into I guess that's a deep blue, which is stages 3 and 4. You'll notice it goes back to gray and then into the light blue, which is REM. So you see that pattern? That is a very specific pattern. It's almost like dance steps, and your body actually has to go through that. That up from the orange to the light blue equals 1 sleep cycle, okay? And as you notice, there's 5 of them because there's 5 REM periods there. So the average, first of all, it takes roughly 90 minutes to go through 1 sleep cycle, and the average individual has 5 of those, all right? So numbers to put into the back of your brain, we're going to use them in a little while. Something else I want you to notice. You notice how the deep blue is more towards the front end and the light blue is more towards the back end? So it turns out that you have more deep stage 3, 4 sleep in the beginning of the night, and you have more REM sleep in the back half of the night. Now, Michael, why is that important? Who cares? What difference does it make? If I get my 1, 2, 3, 4 REM, I should be good, right? Not necessarily. So stage 3 and 4 makes up about 23% of your sleep. And what does it do? This is the wake up and feel great sleep. This is your physically restorative sleep. So one of the things you might realize from the first, or the slide that we just saw, is that your body takes care of your body first. So the physical restoration occurs first. So that's why if you only sleep 3 hours, you can still get up and actually function. But your brain's not functioning too well, right? We're going to get to that in just a second. We know this is where your blood pressure drops. We know this is where respiration slows. You're really starting to get into physical restoration. And there's something in there called growth hormone. So growth hormone does a lot of different things to your body. And I think of stage 3, 4 kind of like going into the body shop and you're kind of pulling out the dents and taking off the scratches to the car, things like that. That all happens in stage 3, 4 sleep. There are a lot of things that can mess with stage 3, 4 sleep, and we're going to talk about that in a second as well. Again, happens in the first third of the night. Now let's talk about REM sleep. So what does everybody usually tell me about REM sleep? What happens during REM sleep? Dreaming, that's right. It's not the only stage of sleep that you dream in, but it is one of them. So this is actually the mentally restorative sleep. So this is where the brain fog goes away. This is where you move information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. For everybody in this room, REM sleep is incredibly important, especially if you want to do things like improve your memory, speed reading, all the things that you do through quick learning. You got to have good REM sleep in order to do it. Okay, that's one of the most critical aspects. So if you don't care about any other stage of sleep, the people in this room are probably going to care about REM. We know that your muscles actually become very, very relaxed in REM sleep. Actually, people become paralyzed in REM sleep. Does anybody want to give a guess as to why you become paralyzed in REM sleep? Yes? So focused on your brain, less focused on your body. That's right. It's all focused on what's going on in your brain. And the second reason is so that you don't act out your dreams. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story about a patient I had. So I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and that was where I started my practice. It was right outside Atlanta, an area called Decatur. And a gentleman come in, and he was a hunter. So if anybody's a hunter, you know that if you shoot a doe and you don't kill it, you have to go over and either slit its throat or crack its neck. Okay, it's the most humane thing to do. I'm not a hunter. I'm just explaining to you what they do. So he woke up with his wife's head. You can't make this stuff up, people. His wife's head about ready to crack her neck. The mechanism that would have caused the paralysis during REM sleep was not working in him. He had something called REM behavior disorder. So people always ask, are they still married? Yes, they are. You'd think that would be grounds for divorce, right? You're almost killing her in your sleep, but she was with him. What was fascinating was it turns out that REM behavior disorder is a precursor for Parkinson's syndrome. And so when we learned that, we brought him straight over to the neurologist, and we were actually able to institute therapy years in advance of what we might have seen. So it's pretty amazing how your sleep is really a window into your health, and it's a window into your life. Sorry, I went off on a little tangent there. So increase of respiration rate, increase of blood pressure. Well, wait a second, I'm asleep. Why is my respiration increasing? Why is my blood pressure increasing? If you look at somebody while they're sleeping based on their EEG and their brain waveforms, they look almost identical to being awake. All right? Because the brain is moving so much, just like you were saying, so much energy and information is going in there. Your brain is accepting all kinds of information while you sleep. It's very, very important to understand. And again, it occurs mostly in the last third of the night. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach everybody a very practical piece of advice, because Jim said we have to be super practical. So how many people in here know what time that they wake up in the morning? It's pretty consistent, right? Okay. On average, what do we see? 6, 6:30, 4? Oh, who said 4? All right, we'll talk about you in a little while. You're in the second half of my talk. So we know that our wake-up time is usually socially determined. What do I mean by that? Work, school, kids. We know that at least 5 days a week, we're probably waking up at roughly the same time. Now remember, I asked you to remember those numbers. How long is a sleep cycle? How many minutes? 90 minutes. And how many does the average person have? 5. 5 times 90 is? Who said 475? No, it's 450. Come on. So 450 minutes. If you divide that by 60, it's roughly 7.5 hours. So first of all, let's dispel a myth. 8 hours is a myth, okay? I've been a 6.5 hour sleeper to 7 hour sleeper almost my whole life. I've got lots of patients who need more. I've got some patients who need less. It all depends upon the length of that sleep cycle. Remember, that sleep cycle is an average of 90 minutes, an average. So what if your sleep cycle was 80 minutes? Then you might need less sleep. If it was 100 minutes, you might need more sleep. Okay? So when you look at these gross generalizations about everybody needs 8 hours, it's not true. So let's figure this out. So if you take your socially determined wake-up time and you subtract 7.5 hours, guess what you get? Your optimal bedtime. How many people go to bed at roughly the same time every night? A lot less than the people who wake up at the same time every morning, right? When was the last time somebody told you to go to bed? Were you like 10, 12 years old? So here's what we're going to do is if you wake up at 6:30, which is when I wake up in the morning, and you count back 7.5 hours, that means that my bedtime should be 11 o'clock. That seems kind of late, doesn't it? But didn't I just say I was a 6.5 hour sleeper just a minute ago? So actually, my bedtime isn't even 11. I rarely go to bed before midnight. Okay? It's okay to go to bed later. It's okay to get only 6.5 hours. If you wake up without an alarm clock, naturally, you're in good shape. That's your body telling you it's done. Okay? Now, there's a big difference between being done at 4 o'clock in the morning, right, and still being exhausted all day, and waking up at 6:30 in the morning and feeling like you've got a lot of energy, right? So I don't want people to confuse those things. But this is an experiment. In 7 days, if you follow this experiment, in 7 days, you will discover exactly what your bedtime is. Because everybody's bedtime is a little bit different. Okay, so don't fall into the idea that you've got to do everything the same as everybody else. Because everybody's body is different. Everybody's individual. Your sleep need is individual. So what happens when we get bad sleep? Well, look at all this stuff. Oh, I went the wrong way again. I keep hitting that button. What happens when you get bad sleep? Hopefully, there we go. Look at this laundry list. High blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, decreased immune function. This was a really interesting study out of the University of Chicago. And what they did, and whether you're into inoculations or not, listen to the study because it was really interesting. They took half the group and they had them regular sleep and they gave them the flu shot. They took the other half of the group, they only let them sleep for 5 hours and they gave them the flu shot. The next day, they exposed them to the flu. Okay? Not a fun study to be a part of, let me just tell you. What do you think happened? Sleep deprived, over 30% greater risk of actually contracting the flu. Your immune function is directly tied to not only the quantity of sleep that you get, but the quality of the sleep that you get. If you get 6.5 hours and it's really good, I don't think I have a problem with that. If you get 9 hours and it's really crappy, I think I have a big problem with that, right? Other areas that was really interested, my favorite one is pain. By a raise of hands, how many people either suffer with pain or have a family member or friend that suffers with some issues surrounding pain? Okay, this was a really fascinating study. So they took college students and they put one of those big drywall buckets and they filled it up with ice water and they measured the temperature and it was cold. Okay, and this was called a cold presser test. And so they took these college kids and they said, we want you to dunk your feet into this and keep them there as long as you can and we're going to time you to do this. You can get away with this with college students. Number one, they're looking for extra credit. Number two, it doesn't do any physical damage. So it was a very interesting test. And by the way, this is very painful. So they did that, and they had them dunk their feet in. Then they had them the next day. That was after they slept their normal amount of sleep. Then the next day, they had them only sleep for 5 hours. They put the same bucket, same temperature, tested, put their feet in. They pulled their feet out twice as fast. The same stimulus hurt twice as much when they were sleep deprived. Same stimulus, exact same stimulus, right? Isn't that amazing how sleep has that effect on us? Isn't that amazing how it affects all kinds of different areas of our lives? I mean, literally every single one of these has a major effect. But I'm not all full of doom and gloom. Here's the good news. if you get good sleep, all of it is reasonably close to reversible. It will certainly all get better. Your immune function increases, you have a reduction in pain, a reduction in stress. Sleep is your secret weapon, okay? Now, I know there's people in the room that have struggled with sleep. I know there's people in the room that say, Michael, I wish I could just get a little bit more sleep or a little bit better sleep. Don't worry, we're going to get to you, right? But I'm here to tell you that sleep absolutely, positively can affect almost every area of your life. It affects every organ system and every disease state. Now, before you figure out how to sleep, you probably need to know where to sleep, right? So I believe that sleep is a performance activity. And I believe that if you have the right equipment, you will perform better. So how many people in here are runners? I'm a runner. A couple of you? Okay, good. So I know this, that I can go to a race, and I can run it in flip-flops and cutoffs with a torn T-shirt and a big boombox on my arm, and I can still get from the start to the finish, but my time's not going to be too good. Right? But if I've got my ASICs on and my dry fit wear and I've got my music going, I'm ready to rock and roll, I perform better because I've got better equipment. I'm going to show you how equipment in your bedroom, how to make a better bedroom for better sleep. So when I think of sleep, I think of the 5 senses, right? So the first one is sight or light. Now we heard Dave Asprey talk quite a bit about light the other day, right? And he was 100% on the money. We absolutely, positively know that light is the thing that affects your sleep the most. Specifically, blue light. Michael, what's blue light? Does it look blue? Actually, it doesn't. It actually looks almost like white light. So here's what's really interesting is you have a very particular type of cell in your eye called melanopsin cells. And these cells, when light hits it, it sends a signal to your brain to turn off the melatonin faucet. Turn it off. Remember, melatonin is that key that starts the engine for sleep. So we really want to have that thing flowing and going at night, not in the morning. So if you have lights in your bedroom at night, you are telling your brain it's morning when it's night, right? And what's one of the biggest sources of blue light? Anybody got a smartphone on them? Right, laptops, iPads, smartphones, exactly. So Dave mentioned something yesterday called Flux, F.LUX. It's a free software program. You can download it to your laptop. But there's a problem because it's not just the blue light that's coming from the device that's giving you a hard time. It's the engagement level. If you're watching Game of Thrones on your iPad while trying to go to sleep, how likely are you to really get a good night's rest? Not very likely, right? You're binge watching your favorite show. So understand the information that's being passed between you and this blue light device, and you might find it to be very interesting. Now, that being said, I'm going to say something a little bit later on, but I'm going to give you a sneak peek. It's okay to fall asleep with the television on. Oh, did he really just say that? Did the sleep doctor just say it's okay to fall asleep with the TV on? Yes, I did. I'm going to explain to you why in just a second. You want to change your light bulbs to either 40-watt bulbs or install dimmer switches in your bedroom. And actually, I work with this company. This isn't a pitch. I just want to make you aware of it. These are specialty bulbs that are created with filters on the inside that filter out the blue light. And they're almost imperceptible. So I have these in my bedside table lamp. So if I have my bedside table lamp, I'm doing okay. Now, you saw Dave had those blue blocker glasses on. I wear those too. Actually, my son, Cooper, is here somewhere. There he is in the back. Oh, by the way, today's Cooper's birthday. Everybody turn around and wish him happy birthday. Happy birthday, Cooper! All right. And so I have Cooper wearing blue blocker glasses around like 8:30, 9 o'clock because he might be working on schoolwork on his laptop. And we really want that blue light to really start to slow down because that's going to have a pretty dramatic effect on him. So whatever you can do to calm the light down, create mood lighting, if you will, it's certainly going to be a good effect. Let's talk about touch, right? So what do I mean by touch? Pillows, mattresses, sheets. So while we were in the VIP lunch, we talked quite a bit about pillows that are out there. You know, pillows are beds for your head, okay? And the sole function of a pillow is to keep your head and neck aligned and keep your head supported. Did you know that you should be changing out your pillow approximately every 18 months to 2 years? I don't think I want you to raise your hand on this question, but I'm just wondering how many people have a pillow that's over 2 years old? Not memory foam. That's a great question. So memory foam doesn't have the structural integrity issues that there are different fills in there that would probably do that. Not memory foam and not latex. by the way. Those are two that will actually last significantly longer. And by the way, when you're picking a pillow, we were talking about this at lunch, how many people go to Bed Bath & Beyond and there's this wall of pillows, right? It's humongous, and you pull one off and then you make sure nobody's looking and you kind of push your head against the side of the pillow. By the way, there's no data to suggest that that's an effective way of choosing a pillow. What you want to do is you want to figure out, do I like squishy or do I like firm? If you like squishy, then you're going to go into that. If you like firm, you're going to go on that side. Then what position do you start sleeping in? Okay, if you start out on your side, by the way, roughly 70% of people sleep on their side. You want a thicker pillow because it needs to make up for the space between your ear and your shoulder, right, to keep your head and nose aligned with your sternum, because that's kind of what you're going for. If you're a back sleeper, you don't want it to be as thick as that because it'll push your head forward, and then you won't be able to breathe too well. And if you're a stomach sleeper like me, which, by the way, is the worst position you can possibly sleep in, is as a stomach sleeper, because if the mattress is here, you have to push your head literally 45 degrees. You might not want any pillow whatsoever. Now, I'll tell you a trick that I use as a stomach sleeper, just out of curiosity. How many stomach sleepers are there? See, my brethren, I love it. So here's what I tell people to do is I actually take a pillow and I put it from the top of my chest all the way down to my groin, and it lifts my whole body up a little bit. So that way when I'm going face down, my head isn't all the way a 45-degree angle, but it's much less. Actually, that would be a 90-degree angle. 45 would be closer to here. It actually is quite helpful, and I have a very, very flat pillow that keeps me there. So thinking about pillow position is going to tell you what kind of pillow, and then if you have any pain, there are actually specialty pillows that can actually put your neck in a position for having less pain. Because if you wake up with either neck or shoulder pain, you need to get a new pillow. It's pretty much guaranteed that that's causing a significant amount of your problems. I could actually, question?
David Avocado Wolf has suggested you sleep with your hip elevated in your head and down.
So actually, I know. So the question was David Avocado Wolf. I know his name. He goes by Avocado. He's hilarious, by the way. I really like his work. He does some really interesting stuff. He recommends that you're actually up and then you kind of lean down. Yeah, and there's actually some data to suggest that might be actually pretty effective. But I could actually spend an entire lecture teaching everybody how to find a mattress. I'm not going to do that. But if you are in the market for a mattress, come back and see me at the end, and I'll explain to you my technique on how to choose a mattress, because it's pretty interesting. Sound. Sound turns out to be a very big factor when we're going to sleep. Now, what's a sound that a lot of us have a tendency to hear in our bedrooms that we're not too particularly fond of? Who said it? What? Snoring. That is, who said snoring over here? Right? So, over here as well. So here's what we know. If you sleep next to a snoring bed partner, you lose approximately 1 hour of sleep a night. Right? So that's the elbow to the side, roll over, honey, because you're keeping me awake. I've actually saved more marriages as a sleep doctor than I think I ever would have as a marital therapist, just by getting people back together and not snoring. There's actually a lot of different anti-snoring things on the marketplace. We were talking at lunch. One of the things I'm a big fan of are internal nasal dilators. They're these little round discs that go actually inside the nostril, and it opens up your airway. You'd be shocked. You would be shocked at how well they work. We all know that snoring increases when you're drinking alcohol or when you've gained weight. And so, for example, if I have a beer or a drink at dinner, my wife will say, hey, put your nose thingy in, right? Because she knows what's going to happen is I'm going to start snoring. I put it in. I don't feel it after about 30 seconds, and it works very, very well. Now, if I could fit one on my French bulldog that sleeps right next to me in bed, life would be a lot easier, trust me. So they're called an internal nasal dilator. The one I use is called Mute, M-U-T-E. There's also one called Breus, B-R-E-Z, that I'm aware of, both of which are pretty effective. What else can you do? Well, you can set the timer on your television. So let's talk about TV and sleep. Why on earth did I say that it was okay to fall asleep with the television on? By a raise of hands, how many people here do fall asleep with the television on? Good. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm here to tell you it's perfectly okay. You know why? Because what you're doing is very few people are actually watching the TV when they're falling asleep. You know what they're doing? They're listening. Their eyes are closed, and they're listening to the television. Because what it does is it occupies their brain. A lot of people tell me that the second they get in bed at night, their brain kicks into gear, and they can't turn off their brain. Raise of hands. How many people suffer from this? So one of the things that people have figured out how to do is watching television. 95% of the TVs out there have television timers in them, and it will turn off after 45 minutes anyway. So go ahead and set the timer. It's okay to fall asleep with the television on, assuming it's not too disruptive to your bed partner. If it's disruptive to your bed partner, then there's other things that you can do. Question? There's nothing wrong with listening to music. There's actually certain sounds that have been shown to help people with sleep. As a matter of fact, ocean sounds have been clinically proven to help people fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer, which is kind of interesting. And then I think Jim was talking about the company called Muse. They actually have some music that's actually specifically designed for sleep. I'm almost positive. By the way, how many people in here hit the snooze button? Keep your arms raised if you hit the snooze. Keep them up, keep them up. How about twice? Keep it up. How about 3 times? Keep it up. How about 4 times? How about 5 times? How about 6 times? How about 7 times? Okay, you can put your arms down. You won the snooze button competition. The single worst invention out there is the snooze button. All right, and I'm going to tell you why. The average snooze button is between 7 and 9 minutes long, and your body can't actually get back into deep sleep. So remember how REM sleep is at the back end of the night? Your body has to go through stage 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to REM. And so by giving yourself only 7 minutes and it keeps being disruptive, you don't actually get back that sleep. I would much rather you set your alarm for the last possible moment where you have to wake up than kind of follow this idea. Earplugs can be very effective. Sound machines can be effective as well. Just depends upon kind of what you're looking for, and I can make some recommendations for people after the show. So what about smell? Could there be smells that help you sleep? Believe it or not, there's been 2 double-blind, placebo-controlled studies to show that certain aromas or aromatherapy can be very helpful for having people sleep. In those studies, there were 2 aromas that were shown to be very effective. One was lavender, not a big surprise, and the other was something called ylang ylang. It's spelled Y-L-A-N-G, Y-L-A-N-G. Both of them actually caused a relaxation response. Now, let's be very clear. You don't just sniff something and pass out, okay? Unless it's like ether or something along those lines, right? But what it does is it causes a relaxation response in your body, and then you can relax, and that sleep deprivation takes over, and it can push you on into sleep. By the way, if you do want to use aromatherapy, one of the things I always have to stress to people is don't use candles. Fire and sleep don't mix, all right? I always have to say that. You just never know. What about food or taste? Could there be things that could be helping me sleep from a taste perspective? Well, of course, we know we want to avoid caffeine. Most people don't know, but caffeine has a half-life of between 6 and 8 hours. 6 and 8 hours, and that can prevent you from getting into the deeper stages of sleep. So I like to tell people to cut the caffeine by around 2 p.m. if they possibly can, and then kind of go decaf. As far as alcohol is concerned, I don't have any problems with you drinking, but remember, there's a really big difference between going to sleep and passing out, okay? Let's be very clear. Number 1 sleep aid in the world is alcohol. So we got to be careful because there's nothing wrong with actually having 1 or 2 glasses of wine with dinner. There's actually some data to suggest that it would actually increase your sleep, but when you get past 2, it actually has a detrimental effect. And that's where you actually don't get into stages 3 and 4 sleep. Half of the reason that you have a hangover is because of too much alcohol and losing that deep sleep. The other half is dehydration. So a big thing to remember to do is to hydrate. Are there foods that affect your sleep? People always ask me this question. So a big one is turkey. I'll get to you in 1 second. Is turkey. Actually, I think we're going to have mic runners at the end, so I'll answer all the questions at the end if that's okay. Turkey. So there's a substance in turkey called tryptophan, all right? And tryptophan is one of the things that makes people sleepy. You would have to eat a 46-pound turkey to get enough tryptophan in your system to actually make it effective. That's number 1. Number 2, tryptophan doesn't work particularly well in the presence of protein, which is what that is. So even in my best days in college, I don't think I could eat a 46-pound turkey, and I don't recommend that you do either. What about warm milk? That's another big one, right? People always say, oh, a glass of warm milk, it helps me fall asleep. So here's what's interesting about warm milk. It also has tryptophan in it. 1.5 gallons. That's what you would need, is 1.5 gallons, okay? You'd be peeing all night long. So we want to kind of avoid that. The reason that warm milk makes people actually fall asleep is because if when you were young and somebody that cared about you gave that to you, you have that reference point, right? You have that part of your life where that really wonderful person was giving you something to help you sleep, and you had that trust, and sleep was a safe place because of it. And that's what's going on there. It's not, you don't have to drink 1.5 gallons of milk in order to get that comfort. But warm milk can help for many people if that's something that you grew up on. So let's talk about travel. Right? This is a tough one. I have lots of business travelers out there. So I'm going to give you a website that you should look at. If you have to fall asleep on an airplane, my favorite website is called seatguru.com. All right? This website is amazing. You punch in your airline and the flight number, it automatically pulls up the schematic of the aircraft, and it gives a red light, yellow light, green light system of which are the best seats on the plane. Okay? This thing is like my Bible. I use it all the time. It's awesome. Also, I bring a sleep kit with me, especially when I'm going to Europe or to Asia or places like that. In my sleep kit, I will have eye shades, earplugs. I like to bring a pillow. Sometimes I'll have a meditation with me. 2 other things that I don't have listed up here, but I do put in my sleep kit: toothbrush and toothpaste, and a hairbrush. Okay, because when you come off the airplane, you don't want your hair to be looking all funky, and you certainly are going to have cotton mouth. So go ahead and bring with you a toothbrush and toothpaste. You'll be pleasantly surprised at how much better you feel when you get off of there. Now, how do you beat jet lag? So jet lag turns out to actually be a fairly complicated process, but we use 4 different substances. We use light, because remember, light turns off the melatonin faucet. We use melatonin. Supplemental melatonin can be very effective. I use caffeine, and I use napping. So I'm going to tell you a story about one of my patients. So one of my patients turns out to be a Saudi Arabian princess. These things happen. They called me up, and she said, I fly from Saudi Arabia to Los Angeles on a fairly regular basis, and I've got 5 to 6 days of jet lag. Now, you should know that your body will self-adjust 1 time zone per day automatically. That's just how your body works, okay? But she was multiple time zones. And so what we did was I had strategically planned naps that would go on during certain parts of her flight using melatonin. Then I had light therapy after she landed, and I did this with caffeine. So I had caffeine and light on the wake up and melatonin and napping on the other side, and I reduced her jet lag from 5 days down to 1. Okay? Now the kicker, which a lot of us may not have this ability to have, is you need to know the direction of travel. That one's kind of easy, but you also need to know your flight schedule. So when I talked to her, I said, please tell me, what is your flight schedule so that I can work things out? And she said, well, what would you like my flight schedule to be? She had her own 747, so it was pretty easy because I got to talk to the pilot, and we were able to figure some things out. I don't think all of us have our own 747, so it might be a little bit different, but these are the types of things that you can utilize. Now, I can't give everybody a jet lag formula because it's different. It all depends upon something called your chronotype, what time zone you start out in, the direction of travel, what time zone you end up in. However, there are jet lag apps that are available that actually are jet lag calculators, and they can be very, very effective for many different people. Am I putting it in the right direction? One of the things you definitely want to try to do if you don't have a jet lag app, but you still want to try to leverage it, is select a flight that allows you to an early evening arrival and stay up till at least 10 o'clock local time, okay? Because you're going to be pretty exhausted. If you do sleep on the airplane and you have this kind of methodology, you want to nap in the beginning of the flight, not the end of the flight. Because remember we were talking about sleep drive and sleep rhythm before? We want your sleep drive to be high when you end up someplace. So in some instances, it might be best to stay awake the whole trip, right? You need to think through that idea, and again, I can give people some private recommendations if they'd like. The next one is, okay, oh, I went too far again. I'm doing that a lot. If you must sleep during the day upon arrival, you want to take a short nap. And I'm going to show you a section on strategic napping and when you should actually be napping, because different naps can actually produce different results. But when I say a short nap, I'm talking about 25 minutes or less. How many people in here have taken a nap and felt worse than when they started? Okay, that's because you napped too long. Generally speaking, you do not want to nap long. You want to nap shorter, unless you can get a full sleep cycle in, which is how long is a sleep cycle? Thank you. There we go. If you can anticipate the time change ahead of time, you can actually start moving your bedtime either later or slightly earlier by about 15 or 20 minutes, 3 days before your flight. This will absolutely help you adjust a little bit better. Upon boarding the plane, this sounds silly, but I do it all the time, is reset your watch to your destination time zone, and then look at it frequently throughout the trip. You want to give a trigger to your brain that says, this is where I'm going, this is where I am, this is where I need to be, right? So think through that idea because it can be actually very, very helpful. You really want to avoid heavy meals on the flight. Don't get the pasta and cream sauce. Okay? Hopefully you've brought food with you. I actually bring different bars with me that I keep in my briefcase because a lot of the stuff on the snack trolley is not very good. It's certainly not going to be good for you from a standpoint of getting an upset stomach. And if you do get an upset stomach, there's not a whole lot of places that you're going to be able to go on an airplane. Also, getting sunlight, remember, turns off that melatonin faucet. So sunlight's going to turn out to be your friend. A lot of times, especially on long flights, I'm requesting a window seat. So that way, if I need to, I can actually raise the window and get sunlight, especially when I'm coming into a new destination where I have to be there and be alert and awake that next day. I also travel with a small light box. These are commercially available. You can get them on Amazon. The one that I happen to use is from a company called Philips, and it's called a Go Light, Golite. You can get it on Amazon. I think it's less than $200 or something like that. It's super effective. I use it with me whenever I do long-haul travel, and it actually really works well in resetting that circadian clock for me. By the way, there is no truth to any jet lag diet out there. I've researched most of them, and I have yet to find one that has any real data on it. So if you're reading a book that says, hey, you should do this or you should do that, unfortunately, it doesn't have a tendency to work. Once you arrive, what about your hotel room? Could your hotel room have an effect on your sleep? I was actually talking with Michael Fishman earlier, yesterday, as a matter of fact, about this. But absolutely, walk up to the desk and ask them, do you have a sleep program? You might be surprised. Some people have pillow menus, some people have quiet floors, different things like that. You will be pleasantly surprised if you just ask, are there better rooms to sleep in than not? The other thing I do is, I said ask for quiet zones. When you're making your reservation, make sure that you're actually speaking to somebody at the property. Because a lot of times the reservation systems are some other country, and they're just looking at a computer screen and throwing you into a room. You want to actually call, and if you make that reservation, that's fine, but then call the property itself and ask to talk to somebody at the front desk, because usually the people at the front desk know all the hidden secrets of the hotel, and they will absolutely know which is the best room to get a good night's sleep in. Higher is better because of less street noise. Also, you want to stay away from the elevators. Obviously, you don't want people wandering in the middle of the night because they've been out partying, things like that. Also, this is a kind of a hidden gem. You want to have a room that faces the west. Why on earth would I say you want to have a room that faces the west? Sunset, exactly, because the sun rises in the east, and if your room is facing the east and you've just been on a long flight, guess what? The sun is going to go right through the curtains, it's going to hit you square between the eyes, and it's going to wake you up. So ask for a room that faces west, that's high up, preferably a corner room so you only have one neighbor to contend with. What happens is the number of rooms starts to drill down quite nicely pretty quickly, and then you can kind of get a feel for where you want to stay. I told you about pillow options, and then bring eye shades and especially earplugs, okay? Go out, go to Walgreens, buy some foam earplugs. They don't have to be the best in the universe, and put them in every suitcase that you own. Because I guarantee you what's going to happen is you're going to show up, and you're going to show up late. They will have already assigned you a room, and somebody is staying next door that has a newborn, right? That's up at 4 o'clock in the morning, or the hockey team is staying next door. So earplugs can be a lifesaver, especially when you're traveling. Let's talk about napping for just a second. It turns out that the time of day that you nap can have a direct effect on what kind of nap you have. So napping with more stage 2 increases alertness. Napping with more stage 3 and 4 improves your memory. And napping with more REM inspires creativity. Well, that's kind of interesting, right? So if you wanted to be really creative, when would you take your nap? Well, you would probably take a nap in the early morning. So across the bottom, you can see that's roughly 9 a.m. Now, that says a 90-minute nap. I don't know about you guys, but I don't have time for a 90-minute nap. So a 25-minute nap at 9 a.m., let's say you've been up since 5:30, if you want to inspire some creativity and lower that adenosine, that's a great way to do it. If you're looking, though, a stage 3 and 4 nap, that's going to be actually closer to about 1 to 3 in the afternoon. What time is it now? What is it about? Almost 4 o'clock, something like that? 20 past 4. So we're in the sleep zone here, right? Is everybody staying awake? Okay, just checking. All right. And then if you want the perfect blend, between 1 and 3 in the afternoon turns out to be the perfect time of day to sleep. How many people, by a raise of hands, have a tendency to feel sleepy between 1 and 3 in the afternoon? Did you know it has nothing to do with your lunch? So it turns out that there's a small core body temperature drop that occurs between 1 and 3 in the afternoon, approximately a quarter of a degree centigrade, in your body. And that core body temperature drop is a signal to your brain to release melatonin. Right? Now, we've been seeing this for thousands of years in Latin American countries. What do they call it there? Siesta, exactly. That's really how our body really has a biological rhythm to it, and it's important to realize that. Now, I'm going to teach you guys the ultimate sleep nap hack. Are you ready? I call it the Napa Latte. Here's what you do. You take a 6-ounce cup of drip coffee. It can be bulletproof coffee. I'm fine with that. Put 2 or 3 ice cubes in it and drink the whole thing as quick as you can. Close your eyes and take a 25-minute nap. You will reduce the amount of adenosine that's in your system. The caffeine sneaks into that receptor site. You're good for 4 hours, guaranteed. I use this with all of my corporate 100 executives. I use it for all of most of my clients. It works really, really well. I can see you guys are taking pictures. I actually have a stand in the back that explains the whole thing, so you can take a picture back there if you don't get a chance to get it here. This is one of my favorite hacks, and it works really, really well. Now, can you catch up on sleep? Unfortunately, you cannot. If you sleep, so as an example, if you stay up late Friday night and sleep in Saturday, stay up late on Saturday and sleep in Sunday, what happens Sunday night? Your body wants to stay up late. You've actually caused a situation that we call social jet lag, right? You've actually moved your body almost a full time zone without meaning to. And so Monday morning stinks, right? And that's the reason why. So you can really only sleep in approximately 30 minutes. So if you normally wake up at 6:30, I want you out of bed by 7. I know that's kind of stinky, like most people don't like that idea. I promise you, the more consistent your sleep schedule, if you get one thing from my talk today, the more consistent your sleep schedule is, not only the faster does your brain go to sleep, but the deeper you sleep. Even if you're consistently only sleeping for 5 or 6 hours, the more consistent that is within that 24-hour schedule, the better off you're going to be. By the way, you're not getting the same sleep that you missed before. Sleep is a lot like a baseball game. So if the baseball game starts at 8 and you show up at 9:30, do they start the game over? No, they don't. And sleep is exactly the same way. Your circadian rhythm wants to start at roughly 10:30 at night if you're a bear. Right? We're going to talk about chronotypes in just a second. So what happens there is if you show up later, you've missed a lot of that stage 3-4 sleep that you wanted to get, and that's not what happens in the back end of the night. What happens in the back end of the night is REM sleep. So you might have great memory, but you're physically so exhausted you can't do anything with it. So remember, the consistency of your sleep pattern is really going to be the best thing that you can do. Bing. So go to bed on time. So I'm going to give you 5 things that you can do during the day to make your sleep better at night. First one, how many people drink coffee as the very first liquid that enters into their system in the morning? Okay, that's bad. All right, I'm just here to tell you that's not how we want to do things. Did you know that while you're breathing, the humidity in your breath, actually, you will lose approximately 1 liter of water every night? That's why you wake up with a dry mouth. That's why you wake up with parched lips. You're dehydrated. What you should have is you should have a bottle of water by your bedside. Drink water first. That's the very first thing you should do. Okay? Now, it turns out that the way you wake up out of unconsciousness is by 2 hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. They both have to rise in order to pull you out of a state of unconsciousness. Well, if you look at how powerful cortisol and adrenaline are, and you look at how powerful caffeine are, it's like cocaine to weak tea, okay? All you're doing is adding weak stimulants onto something that's already elevated in your system. However, if you wait approximately 90 minutes after you wake up, that cortisol and adrenaline naturally begins to dip, and if you have your coffee then, you'll be pleasantly surprised because it will actually help increase your cortisol level back to a state where it's actually a lot more effective. Okay, so wait 90 minutes after you wake up. So if you wake up at 6:30, you're probably having your first cup of coffee around 8 o'clock. Remember, drink water, because that's really what you're going to want to be doing, is getting that in your system. And you want to get 15 minutes of sunlight every morning. So when you're drinking your water, I want you to walk over to the window, and I want you to get some sunlight. Do me a favor, put on a robe before you do this. Okay? I have to tell that to everybody, but some people don't get the message. But that sunlight, remember, turns off that melatonin faucet, right? And so you really want to be careful because melatonin is what's giving you morning fog. I was talking with Dave Asprey yesterday, and he was saying, I was so glad when you finally turned to me and said, you don't have to have this 5:30 in the morning, wake up, feel great, and get your day started kind of person, right? Because it doesn't work that way with everybody. And we're about to start talking about chronotypes in a second, but sunlight is a way to help you almost every morning. It will, so it's a great question. So the question is, does it matter if there's glass or anything like that? The best is direct sunlight. So if you can walk out on your porch, that's going to be the best thing. But again, put on a robe, please. Staying physically active. If you want to improve the quality of your sleep, there's no better way than to be physically active. I'm not saying run a marathon. I'm just saying 20 minutes of physical activity every day. The data is very, very consistent. You will have better quality sleep, and you will fall asleep much more quickly. Again, staying hydrated, especially during the day and especially at night. You want to start to curtail your liquids about 2 hours before bed. Otherwise, you're going to be getting up to go to the bathroom quite a bit, and we want to avoid that as well. And then finally, stop your caffeine by 2 p.m. And I explained that a little bit before. Remember, that half-life of caffeine can indeed affect you when you're falling asleep. Now, lots of people say to me, well, Michael, I'm confused because I can have a big cup of coffee at night and I don't have any problems falling asleep at night at all. If I attached electrodes to your brain, I guarantee you're not getting into deep sleep, right? So it might not be a quantity issue, it could be a quality issue for you. Now, what are things that you can do at night? Well, like I said, 2 glasses of wine isn't a bad idea, but you want to stop drinking approximately 3 hours before lights out. Why 3 hours? It takes the average human body approximately 1 hour to digest 1 alcoholic beverage. Now, I don't know about this Dry Farms wine, because that's some really good stuff out there. That you might be better off with some of that than most of the other ones. But in general, you really want to be careful because it will have an effect on your ability to get yourself into deep sleep. Number 2, you want to limit exercise about 4 hours before bed. I find that there are 2 different types of people. There are some people who get energy from exercise, and there are some people who kind of get mellow from exercise. If you're the latter and you get more mellow from exercise, you can probably exercise up to about 2 hours before lights out. But if you're one of those people that it makes you go, 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 you really want to move to the other side of that, and you want to avoid exercise for about 4 hours before bed. So I have a technique that I call the power down hour. And what I do is, so remember our socially determined wake-up time of 6:30, and then we count back 7.5 hours, and we're in bed at 11. So at 10 o'clock, here's what you do, is you take that hour and you chop it up into 3 20-minute segments. The first 20 minutes, you do things you just got to do, right? And so in our house, it might be getting backpacks together, finding shoes, getting my stuff laid out for the morning, then 20 minutes for hygiene, and then 20 minutes for some form of meditation, relaxation. Here's where tapping could actually be possible for you, something that you can do to sort of bring yourself down. The thing to remember is sleep is not an on-off switch, okay? It's like slowly pulling your foot off the gas and slowly putting your foot on the brake. There's a process that has to occur, and on average, it should take you approximately 20 to 25 minutes to fall asleep. If you fall asleep in under 5 minutes, it's a likely sign that you're sleep deprived, okay? Keep a notepad beside your bed. I don't know how many people have told me that they figured out the cure for cancer right as they were falling asleep and then woke up the next day and it wasn't there, okay? So keep a notepad because you can scribble down a couple of notes. One of the things that I do for people who can't turn off their brain at night is I actually have them do what's called a worry journal, where I actually have them a couple of hours before bed write down all the different things that is affecting them and making them think, and then coming up with one solution for each one of those things, because that can then put that problem to rest for the night. But keep a notepad beside your bed, and what I like to do, or have my patients do right before bed, is what's called a gratitude journal. So there's data to now show that if you think positive thoughts before bed, not only do you fall asleep more quickly, but you have more positive dreams, right? Who doesn't want more positive dreams? So by putting down a gratitude list of all the things that you're grateful for each evening, you will be pleasantly surprised at how much better you fall asleep and how much better you dream. As I said before, stick to one sleep schedule. There's nothing worse than multiple sleep schedules because your brain doesn't know when to go to bed. Because remember, those 2 systems, they get wonky. So you really want to make sure that you go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time every single day. I told you TV is okay, but stay away from the iPad or the iPhone or whatever your tablet du jour is, because that blue light, not only is it much closer than a television across the room, but it's much more engaging, okay? And then stay cool. So this is on a Celsius scale, but generally speaking, you want to keep your bedroom, if you can, somewhere between 65 and 75 degrees. There's some data to show that if it's colder than that, it's going to be disruptive to sleep. If it's warmer than that, it's going to be disruptive to sleep as well. Now, how many people, when they get hot, find that they stick their foot out from under the covers and it instantly cools them down? Okay, so that's like your little thermostat. So there's actually different skin on the bottom of your foot, and it actually dissipates heat much more quickly because there's no hair on the bottom of your foot. And so if you're getting too warm in bed, just uncover your feet, and you might be pleasantly surprised at how much better it has a tendency to work. So I'm going to give everybody my favorite recipe. How many people in here take magnesium at night for sleep? Okay, so I'm going to show you a really cool way to get your magnesium, and it's called banana tea. So now this recipe is also in the back again, but I'm going to teach it to you really quick. Take one whole organic banana and wash it off. Cut off the tip and the stem, cut it in half, and leave the peel on and the fruit in it. Did you know that bananas are loaded with magnesium? Did you know that the peel has 3 times the amount of magnesium as the fruit? So you know what I'm going to ask you to do now, right? I'm not going to ask you to eat the peel. Everybody always says that. If you take your banana that's washed off and cut in half with the peel on and the fruit in, put it into about 4 cups of boiling water, drop it in there and leave it in there for about 3 to 4 minutes. Okay? Then steep the water and drink the water. I call it banana tea. If you like bananas, it's delicious. And if you add a little raw honey to it, it'll also even out your blood sugar across the night, and it will knock you out. It's a great holistic way to get your magnesium without it being in a supplement form, and it actually reacts a lot better than normal magnesium does. So with that, we're going to go ahead and switch to the second presentation, if we can. Is there somebody up there who's going to? Yep, we got it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 questions. Actually, what we're all going to do is we're all going to stand up, because I've seen a lot of yawning, and let's do a little quick stretch. So everybody, arms straight up. There we go. There we are. Now turn to your side. Open it up. Don't punch your neighbor, even though you may want to. There we go. Roll the shoulders a little bit. Better? All right, go ahead, sit back down. We're going to keep going. Yes, question.
So the question from earlier, which I remember, so I drink raw milk,
Okay.
colostrum, and honey before bed, and I give it to all my friends who come and stay with us, and it knocks them out. I'm wondering if it's releasing melatonin, if it's what.
All right, so
basically, raw milk, raw colostrum, and honey before bed seems to be like a miracle. It just knocks people right out. I was wondering if you knew about the process of that might be.
So the question was, he has an elixir that he presents to all of his house guests, and it's raw milk, raw colostrum, and raw honey. So the raw honey definitely is helping keep the blood sugar even throughout the night. There's actually good data on colostrum. Generally speaking, it's good for a lot of different things, but it's especially good for sleep. I don't know about the raw milk part, but it's something I could definitely investigate for you. But I would say that definitely has got some of the things in it that we certainly would want. Uh-huh.
Maybe I'm sleep deprived, but I almost every single time when I hit the pillow, I'm gone within a minute, and I instantly dream. What does that mean? I go right into dream.
So you can actually, so his question is that when his head hits the pillow, he instantly falls asleep and he almost starts dreaming immediately. You can actually dream in any stage of sleep, but the greatest likelihood is you're really sleep deprived. And that's probably what's forcing you into that. Okay. So now let's talk, actually I'm going to go through this and I'm going to stay up here and I'm going to answer every question that's here, I promise you. Okay? So now we're going to talk about my newest work, which is my book called The Power of When. So fortunately, everybody in here has probably taken the quiz, so you can learn a little bit more. But remember, there are 2 distinct systems for sleep, right? We talked about the drive and we talked about the rhythm. It turns out that there's more than one rhythm, okay? And nobody is talking about it, and so I actually wrote a book about it to be able to give people that information. Right? And so it turns out that there are multiple rhythms that are out there. But there actually is a best time to do just about anything. This is a great graphic where it talks about different things. So for example, we know that melatonin secretion starts at like 2100 hours. We know that bowel movements become suppressed at 22. We know that there's a heightened alertness at 10 o'clock in the morning. Highest testosterone secretion is at 9 o'clock in the morning. There's very regular patterns that are going on here. Very regular patterns for bodily function. Okay? But different people have what we call different chronotypes. And so we know that all hormones live a circadian life. This is just a few examples, right? So we see melatonin all the way to the right. We see adrenaline in the middle. We see cortisol all the way to the left, right? These are all hormones that are very, very predictable in our world, okay, and in our bodies. But it turns out that there are some people who are early morning people, and there are some people who are night people. How many people, by a raise of hands, have taken the quiz and are a lion? Okay, I'm going to tell you about you. How about people who are a wolf? There we go. I knew you were a wolf anyway. Mr. Snooze over here. There's a reason why you snooze so much, and it has to do with your chronotype. 10 to 15% of people are lions. 10 to 15% of people are wolves. We're going to get into it, but if you just looked at the melatonin curve, if you separated people by their chronotype, we actually see melatonin changes in the body based on chronotype. Okay, so again, not everybody has the same rhythm going on. And once you know your rhythm, you will be really surprised at what's going to happen. So everybody took the biotime quiz, and it takes into account a lot of different things. Some of it's personality, some of it's sleep timing and preference, some of it's sleep drive. Now, one of the questions that I had during lunch was somebody said, I took the quiz, and it nailed me for one thing, but it didn't say the right things about my personality. I only had 35 questions to work with on an internet-type quiz, so there are hybrids that are out there. So if you were a bear, which about 50% of the room will probably be a bear, don't worry, you might actually lean towards one or the other, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So let's talk about my lions. Raise the hands of lions again. All right, lions, you are my COOs. You are my early morning optimists with medium sleep drive. You're my go-getters and my leaders a lot of the time. You're also likely to prioritize health and fitness, which is great. And you like to make a plan, and you're very anal about sticking to it, right? You like to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. You don't like to monkey around there. You don't want to jump all over the place. That's not where your strengths are. You have a tendency to go to bed early, okay? You wake up around 5:30 in the morning. You go to bed around 8:30 at night. So while a lot of people have what I call lion envy, right, because they think that they're going to have that miracle morning and start everything at 5 a.m., there's a social consequence, okay? And the social consequence is you're exhausted by 8 o'clock, right? I mean, forget dinner and a movie. You're lucky to make it through dinner most of the time, right? That's very, very, I know Dr. Lowe is over here. She was talking about this earlier. You told me I could pick on you, so I'm picking on you now. You'd be very surprised. Lions, while, again, a lot of good operators and kind of very good at logistics and getting things done, on the social side of things, it can actually be quite challenging. Let's talk about our bears. How many people came up as a bear? Should be a majority of the room. Okay, good. So roughly 55% of people are bears. And bears are great. Bears are my extroverts. These are my solar sleepers with a very healthy sleep drive. These people are the glue for society. They have a tendency to get stuff done. My lions have a tendency to lead, but might not necessarily get through it all. My bears are the people that make it all happen. I love hanging out with bears because they're fairly extroverted, nice and open-minded. They also are very enjoyable. Like if you sit down with a bear at lunch, they're going to tell you the funny story that's going on at the office. They're going to tell you what TV show they're watching. They're very extroverted, a lot of fun to talk to. And believe it or not, most of society is built around a bear's schedule. What? Too fast? Well, you know you're getting all the slides, right? Right? Jim has been super generous, and everybody's going to be able to get all the talk. So don't worry, you're going to get there. But I can make the slides available as well, don't worry. These are my bears. Everybody get a picture that wanted one? Okay, good. So let's talk about wolves. I am a wolf, just like you are. My wolves are my late night creatives. If you're an entrepreneur at some point in time in your life, you are probably a wolf. Okay? These are my actors, my inventors, my authors. These are my super creative, but sometimes introverted people. We have a tendency, we might not like to take the stage, although I happen to like to take the stage. Generally speaking, we have a tendency to kind of lean back, we show up late at the party, and we decide if you're worth our time. If you are worth our time, then we are great friends, we're super loyal, and we're very, very interested in what you have to say. But we have to survey the scene a little bit to decide, right? Am I right? We have to, See, I got a wolf right back there. We have to survey the scene to really understand and know what's going on out there. So wolves have a tendency to go to bed usually not before midnight, and they would, if left to their own devices, could sleep until 8, 9 o'clock. But I've got extreme wolves as well, right? And so some of my wolves don't want to go to bed before 3 or 4 a.m., and they want to sleep until 10:30 or 11. Now, by the way, almost all teenagers are wolves. How many people have a teenager at home? You all met my son, Cooper. He just turned 15 today. I also have a daughter, Carson. She's 13. And we are the wolf pack, okay? It's unbelievable. All of us like to stay up late. It's not uncommon for all of us to be up late and hanging out and having fun. I'll tell you an interesting story about my daughter, Carson. So wolves are not very talkative until they kind of hit their peak time. And when I pick my daughter up from school, I say, "Hey, Carson, what's going on?" And she said, "Nothing." "How did you do in school today?" "Fine." Did you make any new friends?" "No." "Okay." If I walk into her room at 10:30 at night, and I've done this, ask the exact same questions, I can't shut her up. She'll talk to me for 45 minutes to an hour. And that's my daddy-daughter time, right? I mean, I'm up, I'm good with it. And so you have to learn how to adapt, because this becomes a great communication skill. When you know and understand what your chronotype is, and you know what your bed partners is, or your children, or other people that are in your home, you will be really surprised to learn what times are they going to pay attention to you, and what times are they not going to pay attention to you. By the way, I'm now having companies ask me to chronotype their entire company, and then they're scheduling meetings at very specific times, so that way they know, because they know that the creatives are all going to want to have a meeting later in the day, and we can actually get them to do something as opposed to falling asleep, versus my lions who want to manage everything in the morning, right? You can see where that disconnect can come very, very easily. Now let's talk about the dolphins. Dolphins are my problem children, but I love my dolphins dearly because these are the people that I usually see in clinic. Dolphins oftentimes have fairly erratic sleep schedules. They often have a very short sleep drive, but they crave longer bouts of sleep, and they may be self-diagnosed as insomniacs, or they may have been diagnosed by their doctor as insomniacs. But these are highly intelligent people. They get a lot of work done, but they do have a tendency to be a little bit on the obsessive-compulsive side. And one of the things I've found with a lot of my dolphins is they're their own worst enemy in a lot of different ways. They're trying to get stuff done, and it has to be perfect. And when it's not perfect, they just don't want to turn it in. How many people can relate to that? Oh, I knew I'd had a bunch of dolphins in the audience. They can be very fast-talking, very well-read, and a lot of fun, but you got to be used to the dolphin, as it were. So who cares what your chronotype is? Why on earth would it matter? Well, one thing is it tells you when you should be going to sleep and when you should be waking up, but that's only a really small part of your day, right? I mean, why do we sleep? We sleep to wake. We sleep to have energy during the daytime. We sleep to be productive. We sleep to spend time with our loved ones. That's why we sleep. But wouldn't it be cool if we knew that there was a perfect time of day to do certain things? So what we did was remember how the hormones all work on a very circadian cycle? So what I did was I matched hormones to specific activities. This is getting kind of interesting here. And then, am I hitting the wrong button again? And then we actually figured out certain activities should occur at certain times during your natural rhythms. So if you're a lion, all of your rhythms happen a lot earlier in the morning. But if you're a wolf, all of your rhythms happen a little bit later in the evening. Gets really interesting really quickly. So I'm going to talk about several different health categories where this can come into play. So I added sex into the top one because that's the number one question that I get asked. So the slides are a little bit different on this one, but you'll get the picture. So when you're looking at something like sex, right, the hormones that you need are testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, vasopressin, oxytocin, and cortisol. And you want all of those to be high. The one hormone that you want to be low is melatonin. All makes sense, right? So guess what happens? 73% of people have sex between 10:30 and 11:30 at night. Guess where your hormones are that you need? They're all south. They're all down. And melatonin is high. Pretty interesting, right? So when you take a look at something like this and you say, well, Dr. Breus, what exactly are you trying to tell me? You guessed it. I want you having sex Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. All right? I want everybody in the room to try it. You will be pleasantly surprised. Say, Dr. Breus gave me the prescription to have sex at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning to see what happens. And here's what you'll find. So what happens when you don't have chronocompatibility? What happens when one person's a lion and the other person's a wolf? Well, I created a matrix to solve that problem here. And so you've got male chronotypes across the top and female chronotypes across the bottom. A couple of interesting things that came out. All women felt more desire between 6 and midnight. Lions had the strongest desire in the morning, and men would have sex whenever it was offered. Not a particularly big surprise, guys, but what are you going to do? So I created this matrix. It's actually in the book, which is going to be on sale afterwards if people want to check it out. It's pretty fun and pretty interesting. Also, I created 2 other matrices, one for lesbian couples and one for gay couples, because the hormones are very, very different. So we're keeping everybody in mind what we're saying here. And you'll notice there's an early evening time and an early morning time. Again, what we're trying to take advantage of is your natural biological rhythms and when your hormones are already going to be where you want them to be. So what about drugs? Let's talk about caffeine. Right? Well, we already talked a little bit about this. We talked about the cortisol rhythm, and we talked about your metabolic rhythm. What do I mean by that? Remember, cortisol is that thing that pulls you out of sleep in the morning, and so you don't want to add caffeine on top of that. You want to wait approximately 90 minutes, because drinking coffee the first thing in the morning does not wake you up. All it does, it gives you side effects. I promise you. So I've actually got here a schedule for everybody to decide when they want to have their first and or maybe second cup of coffee. By the way, all you wolves out there, you shouldn't have that second cup of coffee because you're really getting energy in the later part of the day. All right? You may have coffee in the morning, but that's because you're waking up at a time when you really shouldn't be waking up. So take a quick pick of this if you want to know when the perfect time is to drink some coffee. Is there a right time to run? The answer is yes, there is. It turns out that depends on what you want to do. If you want to burn fat, running in the morning makes the most sense because you're running on an empty stomach and you've got to get those reserves and fuels from somewhere, so that's going to be a better time for you. Now, I will tell you this. Generally speaking, I ask my lions to exercise in the early evenings. Michael, you just said fat burning, I could do it. I'm not as concerned about fat burning for my lions. A lot of times they're pretty fit anyway. If you exercise in the early evening and you're a lion, it actually gives you energy to make it through till about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. So that's something that a lion and wolf partnership could do together because that's about the time that a wolf wants to exercise. It's not always the time that a lion wants to exercise, but it gives them that energy. It also gives them an opportunity to be together and enjoy something together. If you're doing it for performance, it's very, very different, right? And so if you want to run a race, you should be training during the time when your races would be. There's a lot of data. I've done some work with some elite athletes, and one of the things that we know is if you train at roughly the time that you're going to be performing, you actually train better, and you actually perform better. Training for strength, the rhythm to grow muscle has very little effect from a chronotype standpoint. However, strength is very, very different. So making a muscle bigger is very different than making a muscle stronger. Making a muscle stronger, we know that lions do better in the afternoons, early evening for bears, and late evening for dolphins and wolves, because that has a tendency to calm them down in the late evening. By the way, if you're a bear and you try to exercise in the early evening, good luck. Because one of the things I've learned from many of my bears is if they don't exercise in the earlier part of the day, they just won't do it. Right? Anybody have that experience before? So if it's between not exercising and you need to exercise a little bit earlier and you're a bear, go ahead and exercise a little bit earlier. The pros outweigh the cons for sure. Also, your pain tolerance is different, especially for wolves. The reason that we don't like to exercise is because as it gets later in the day, we perceive pain more and more, and exercise can be painful. So something to think about if you're a wolf and you're thinking about exercise. Let's talk about alcohol. There's actually 3 different rhythms that concern alcohol. There's something called your tolerance rhythm. Did you know that if you drink a mimosa at 9 o'clock in the morning, you will stay drunk for a significantly longer period of time than if you drink it in the afternoon? So it turns out that your body produces something called dehydrogenase, which is something that breaks down alcohol, and that actually doesn't occur in your circadian rhythm until early to late afternoon, kind of around something called happy hour. That's why you can drink more during happy hour, and that's why bars actually had happy hours, because they found that people have a tendency to drink more. And by the way, you get a different kind of uplifting feeling, as it were, when you drink in the later part of the day. And I actually have a whole slide on strategic drinking here. So, when is your best time to have a beer or a glass of wine so that it doesn't put you into Sleepyville? These are some of the best times. So for my Dolphins, between 6 and 8, Lions, a little bit earlier, Bears, kind of in the middle, and of course my Wolves, you're my late night partiers, you guys are going to be doing better then. But again, be careful. You don't want to go too far because then you are going to end up in a situation which could affect your sleep. I also brought up some hangover hacks, because these are things that people may want to do. Number 1, drink 1 glass of water for every alcoholic beverage. Remember, alcohol is a diuretic. It will make you pee. So you want to be very, very careful because you're going to start losing water very quickly. I've read at least 3 articles to show that coconut water helps with a hangover. I saw the science, and I was hard to believe it, but I'm telling you, give it a shot. If you're prone to hangovers, that might be very helpful for you. Again, stop drinking about 3 hours before bed. And it also turns out that magnesium and vitamin B in the morning are 2 of the things that you get depleted from alcohol very, very quickly. So go ahead and take some supplements. Don't take them the night before. Doesn't work nearly as well as if you take them in the morning. And then finally, just time seems to really have a thing for it. So going to bed. So I told you how to choose your optimal bedtime, but I didn't tell you how to do it for your chronotype. So Lions and Bears. Raise a hand, Lions and Bears. All right, this is what you should do. 90 minutes from your wake-up time, 5 sleep cycles, add 20 minutes to fall asleep. Roughly 7.8 hours from your wake-up time is roughly when you want to have as your bedtime. Interestingly, though, when you look at Dolphins and Wolves, they don't have a tendency to have 5 sleep cycles. They have a tendency to have 4 sleep cycles. So the timing is significantly different. Okay, so what am I saying here? I'm saying that for my Lions and my Bears, they will have a tendency to get closer to 8 hours. But for my Wolves and Dolphins, don't drive yourself nuts if you're not getting it. You're going to be doing just fine if you can get 6.5 to 7 hours. Okay, does that make sense? So I think I even have bedtimes on here. Yeah, so here we go. Wake-up times and bedtimes. These are, again, averages across your chronotype. Again, interesting information because everything predicates off the bedtime and the wake-up time because that's when your hormones kick back in and that's when you can know is the perfect time of day to do certain things. So let's quickly talk about productivity, right? Because that's one of the big reasons that we're here. We're here for our health, but we're also here to be more productive. I'm going to show you 4 different areas that you can be more productive in just knowing the right time of day to do a particular activity now that you know your chronotype. So the first one is brainstorming. So this is really fascinating research, but it turns out that there are 4 different rhythms that are important for brainstorming. One is called the connectivity rhythm. This is when both sides of your brain have a tendency to talk to one another. That doesn't happen throughout the daytime. The second one is the distraction rhythm. How many people had their greatest idea ever while they were in the shower, right? Or on the treadmill, or riding a bike? That's because your body is physically distracted by one thing and allows your mind to get to something else that's going to be more important. There's also something called the novelty rhythm. This is very interesting. So when you meet somebody new or you have a new experience, you actually have an elevation of something called dopamine. Why is dopamine so important? Aside from the fact that it is the thing that all of us are addicted to, and that's the reason why drugs became so popular in the 60s, it actually helps stimulate new experiences and helps you brainstorm significantly better. So if you want to have that next great idea, it's actually a good idea to talk with and meet with new types of people. You ever had that experience where you meet somebody new and you're like, oh my gosh, we're connecting so well and we're having all of this brainstorm and we're getting all these ideas out there? The reason why is because you've actually increased your level of dopamine, which has released some of that in your system. The other has to do with REM sleep. Remember how I said you move information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory during REM sleep? Well, that's going to be critically important because now you can pull that information back out when you need it, right? And so what are some of the most productive times? Actually, turns out in the morning, you have 2 really moments of what I call groggy greatness. And again, this is all in the book, but you'll notice the very first times, a lot of people are still asleep, right? So that's during REM sleep. So if you, right as you wake up in the morning, remember that notepad I said to put by your bed? Before you go to sleep, put a topic on it that you want to brainstorm in the morning. And when you wake up, right after you wake up, grab that notepad and write down everything you can think about that topic. You will be shocked within 2 or 3 days at how many really amazing ideas that you're going to start coming up with. If you're looking for that next idea generator, this is one of the things. But generally speaking, we see that in the later part of the evening, when people start to get a little sleepier or a little groggier, that's when that stuff comes out as well. Not from a productivity standpoint, but from a creativity standpoint. Because we've got to know when to be creative, so then we know when to be productive. How about memorizing things? Well, we know Jim Quick is the master of that, but there's actually times of day where you're going to be better at it than others. There's 3 different rhythms here that you need to take into account. One is the acquisition of information, one is the consolidation of that information, and then one is the recall of that information. So it turns out that based on your chronotype, by the way, everybody can acquire data almost throughout the day. But it's the consolidation and it's the recall where the data is very, very interesting. So that information consolidates during REM sleep. So you don't have to worry about that time. It's just the recall time that you're going to find is going to be very, very helpful. So if you had to learn a bunch of statistics or you have to take a big test or something like that and you want to recall information, these times based on your chronotype have been shown in the data to be very, very effective at helping you out quite a bit. How about presentations? How many people in here have to present on a fairly regular basis? Okay, so what's really interesting about this is we know this has a lot to do with people's chronotype. Lions love to be in front of a room. They love to get up there, they love to talk, they love to hang out and discuss things. Dolphins, not nearly as much. Dolphins would be very happy if they can stay in the back, do their thing, and maybe talk a little bit about, their idea one way or another. Not all the time, but certainly generally speaking. My wolves, they'd actually rather relocate to happy hour, generally speaking, than be up on stage, because my wolves are my party animals. And then I went too far again. My bears are actually just happy to be in the audience. They're not necessarily the biggest presenters in the universe, but they can, and they do, when they really want to get up there, be very, very good presenters. How about rhythms for attending a presentation? So what is the most flexible time of day to call a meeting or to give a presentation? There was a really interesting study that took a look at this. The most flexible time of day that most people have is between 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The second best time is between 10 and 11. The least flexible is at 9:15 in the morning because you're just starting your day. You want to kind of get in there and get your stuff done. And then the second worst time is lunch. Nobody wants to go to a lunch presentation, let me just tell you right now, unless it's what we call an eating meeting, where you're providing food and then everybody seems to show up for free lunch. The last one, I keep hitting the button wrong. There we go, is looking at a day of the week. Tuesday afternoons, people have the most flexibility for some reason. This was a study that was done based on a scheduling software, where they looked at over 500,000 meetings and then attendance at those meetings, because it was like a conference call thing that people called into. The data was very, very impressive. Monday morning, nobody wants to have a meeting. I remember I used to work for a guy that used to have 7 a.m. Monday morning meetings every single week. He was like, we got to kick off the week in a really good way. I'm a wolf. Okay, I would fall asleep regularly at these meetings. It was not good for my career, let's just put it that way. Now you know why I work for myself. Giving a presentation, this is a whole nother thing. When is your energy going to be high? When are you going to be able to give the most out of your presentation, right? So when are you going to be on your peak? And then when is your audience going to be able to engage with you the most? So there are on times of day and off times of day. So if you want to take a picture of one thing today, this is it, okay? Is what are your on times of day and what are your off times of day? It turns out that you have 2 definite times of day where your energy is going to be the highest naturally, and you're going to be able to present yourself in the best light. And I've listed them all here. Hopefully people are taking a picture, but you see one is in the earlier morning and one is in the later afternoon, okay? Now, for some people, it's a fairly wide spread on the afternoon one, but the things you want to avoid, right, are those times in between. Did everybody get that? Did I go too fast on that one? Yeah, the lines are super long because the lions actually, where are my lines? Yeah, the lions actually, that should be 9 p.m., not 9 a.m. I apologize, because that would mean they would be giving a presentation in their sleep. All right, thank you for noticing. I will change that in my slides. I'm sure my wife has already scribbled that down and told me that I need to change it. Audience engagement. After 30 minutes, 1 in 7 people will zone out. Okay, I've been up here for almost an hour. So there's a whole lot of people who have probably zoned after 45 minutes, 1 in 3 will be a zombie. So you want to keep it short. all right? And something that Jim was actually mentioning the other day, which is called cognitive backlog occurs. Your brain can really only handle so much information at a time. You've been drinking from the fire hose with me right now because I'm throwing a lot of information at you. Don't worry, remember, you're going to get this, you're going to get the whole thing, and you'll be able to have my slides, that's fine as well. But remember, you don't want to give too much information because sometimes people really can't get to it. You want to kind of stick to the salient points if you possibly can. I've actually created the best and the worst times. The thing I want you to focus in on more is the worst times. 9 a.m., again, lots of morning fog. 2 p.m., lunch dip. And 6 p.m., most people are just pretty much done for the day. How about making a decision? This one can be very, very interesting. You know what your on-peak times are, and you know what your off-peak times are, because I just had everybody take a picture of it. So you really want to look at how you make that decision. It's very interesting because when you're on peak, you make decisions in a logical way, and when you're off peak, you make decisions in an emotional way. We all know that logical decisions 9 times out of 10 are going to be better than emotional decisions. So you want to be very, very careful to know and understand when you're making these decisions. What are these influenced by? Sleep deprivation for one, personality, as well as what we call the procrastination rhythm. So when we take a look, these turn out to be some of the best times of day to make those decisions, simply because these are your on times. So what you'll notice is if you take a picture of the on times and you take a picture of this, the times should coordinate. Now the question is, did I mess up the lines again? Okay, no, I didn't mess up the lines too badly. All right, good to know, good to know. So how do you stick to your chronotype? Well, first of all, keep a consistent bedtime. I think I've said that like 100 times, but I really want to drive that point home. The more consistent you are, the more your body craves this level of consistency, and it's going to be much better off for you. Eat roughly every 4 hours to avoid blood sugar problems. We know that when blood sugar goes up and down, it can definitely have an effect on you in many different ways. Try to exercise at your correct time for your chronotype. You will find that not only are your workouts better, but you will get stronger and faster. And then finally, limit chrono disruptors like caffeine, alcohol, things of that nature. Now, one question that everybody always asks me is, can you hack your chronotype? So if I'm a lion and I want to be a wolf, can I do that? It's not as easy as you might imagine. I've done this before with people where we've used light therapy because we can move people's circadian rhythm with light, but you have to do it every single day. You can't miss a day because your body naturally wants to fade back. The chronotypes, by the way, are genetic. Okay? These are based on something called the PER3 gene, which all of us have. And so you're fighting Mother Nature when you're trying to go outside of your chronotype. But you can move a little bit. You can probably move one. So if you're a bear, you can inch your way towards being a lion or inch your way towards being a wolf. If you're a wolf, you can inch your way towards being a bear. Those types of things. But you're going to have a really rough time going from wolf to lion. That's not going to be an easy transition at all. And let's see. How do you make yourself into a morning person? I got asked this question, so I figured I'd do a slide. This is one of my last slides, I promise. Going to bed at the right time for you every single night, including the weekends. Never hit the snooze button, my wolf friend over here. Get direct sunlight for 10 minutes in the morning. Then you also want to drink an 8-ounce glass of room temperature water. Let there be light and music. So how many people listen to music in the morning? Oh, that's surprising. Not as many as I thought. So I walk into my son's room to get him in the morning, and he makes his way into the shower, and he's got one of these UE boom things, and he's blasting the tunes, right? And I love it, okay? If you really want to help yourself wake up in the morning, music will cause emotional response in your system. Go ahead and put on some music. Don't put on classical. Okay? Don't put on your favorite love song. Put on somebody like the Beastie Boys, right? Or, somebody that you really like to get, rocking and rolling to. So whatever your favorite music is that you're listening to, jam out. I mean, don't go dancing in the shower because you're going to fall and maybe hurt yourself, but you really want to do something to be able to help you out in terms of waking yourself up in the morning. Obviously, exercising your body and mind in the morning, and take a cool, not cold shower. So at the end of your shower, for the last minute, take the faucet and every 15 seconds or so, move it about a quarter of a turn to turn the hot off. Just a quarter of a turn, quarter of a turn, quarter of a turn. I don't want you to go cold, I just want you to go cool. What ends up happening is your blood vessels begin to dilate, and it actually helps wake you up even more. Okay? So let's see. With that, am I done? Wait, I keep pushing the button. And there we go.